So the best way to look at how to see how your store is shaping up and what do you need to do going into 2025 is to take a look at the numbers that inform 2024. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at some of the numbers, the store count, industry sales, and look at what are your opportunities to benchmark, to determine how you're moving along and what you need to adjust as we head into 2025. Joining us today is Chris Rapanick. He is Managing Director of NACS Research. If you need to know something about the industry, Chris is the guy. So thank you for joining us today, Chris.
Oh, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be on.
So I started out by saying, among things, we have a new store count. 152,000 stores, a drop of, I think it's 141 stores. So essentially that means we're flat. I'm guessing you're looking at that number and saying flat's a pretty good place to be with all the things going on in retail.
For sure. And there is, just a couple channels, honestly, that have been growing. Dollar, for example, has grown store count every year all the way through COVID. So it's pretty exclusive to that channel. Grocery has been declining, drugs been declining. So yeah, I think that we feel pretty good about just 100 or so stores down. A lot of those, it turns out, are smaller operators, singles mainly. So we know that the operating environment's tough, especially when you're not at scale like some of the larger companies. So some of that's expected, and really the single store flow comes and goes all the time. So certainly not a reason to run for the hills, but with that being said, something that we've been watching for sure.
Within the numbers, there was a pretty significant increase in stores that sold fuel, while there was a pretty significant decrease in the one-store small operators that don't sell fuel. And I imagine part of that is at last year's NACS State of the Industry Summit, one of the comments was, if you don't sell fuel, you might be underwater. And the advantage about selling fuel probably is one of the reasons that we saw the drop with the non-fuel stores. But was there anything else in that when people are talking about, here we are, we're in a climate today where EVs are the future, and they are the future, but they're starting to feel less like the present, and fuels may have a little longer runway than I think people were talking about a few years ago.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And what we think with those guys that weren't selling fuel, the industry as a whole has been kind of sitting on a float of fuel margin, 44 cents again. It looks like it's going to be this year for 2024. And, if you're not selling fuel, then you have to have a really good offer on the inside, obviously. And, some of those smaller guys are having, difficulties. They're competing with QSRs who are super aggressive right now, pricing wise, but they're also competing with some of these food forward retailers that we're seeing grow. Some of the larger companies, when you look at, really the top half, these guys are all really focused on food. And they're doing a pretty good job with it, as a matter of fact, most of them. So we're seeing that, it's difficult for a single store to pay their operating expenses when they don't have that fuel float to go. And I think that's probably a big piece of it is you can only, stay, solvent for so many years when you're, running short on expenses on a regular basis.
We're going to be talking a little bit about some preliminary numbers. These are not final numbers. These are not the numbers that go into the NACS State of the Industry report. These are not the numbers that will necessarily be on the NACS State of the Industry Summit stage. But maybe just a little bit of a peek at what's going on, so people can determine what their next steps are in terms of how they might want to react or act or proactively act towards some things. So you had mentioned you had mentioned food service. Looking at previous NACS SOI data, looking over a 20-year period, in 2003, 13.1% of all in-store sales were food service. So basically 1 out of $8.
Mm-hmm.
The latest year that we have official finalized data was 2013. That number had jumped to 26.7%.
Mm-hmm.
So more than doubled. Now more than 1 out of every $4 spent inside the store or doors is food service. So I imagine that's something that you and your team are closely looking at. Where is food service going? Because while fuel is still important, we're kind of straddling that line between, are we a restaurant, are we a gas station, and how do you think of us first?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, I've been around NACS for just over 15 years now. And we've been, beating that drum for 15 years. Be ready to move to the future. Food is, the way that you're going to prepare yourself for the future. And, some have done better than others, of course. But it's interesting that you say that, because we're really putting, our foot on the pedal for food service this year at the SOI Summit. Hopefully folks know that we're doing this in conjunction with the NACS Food Safety Forum this year. So that's going to be on the front side of the SOI Summit in Dallas. We have Andrew Bale from Wawa is going to be one of our speakers. So obviously, they've got a pretty good grasp on how food service should run in a convenience store. We have Chris Castalgi from NIQ, who is their food service guru. And we're doing a couple of other things that are going to be food forward and really focused. So we can, kind of back up what we say this year and say, hey, food is actually more important, going forward, and you just have to keep your foot on the gas. So I think we're kind of putting our money where our mouth is this year at the summit, and I'm pretty excited about it, honestly.
So I love talking about numbers. And of course, you have as many details about the industry and numbers as anyone. So I'm always sending emails or whatever. What about this? What about this? But research is really about doing something with the numbers.
Yes.
What do they mean? What is benchmarking? And when you talk about food service, obviously there will be, one of the things NACS focuses on, are the numbers up? Are they down? The other part is why, and what are people looking for? And your team spends a lot of time also talking to experts, bringing experts to NACS members to look at, what are the big trends in food service. Obviously, a lot of people say, okay, you can sell food service, but number one, it's got to taste good. It's got to be priced affordably. It's got to be safe. And at Food Safety Forum, that's part of the SOI Summit, is a great opportunity to learn more from leaders in that industry, because if food safety, it flows down from there. If you don't have safe operations, or you need to improve your operations there, you're really on that razor's edge with what's your brand image and what's your future. So that was a long question. Take apart a little bit about the food service. Is there any preliminary sense you can give about where the numbers are? And then secondarily, what are the things you're looking at besides the numbers in communicating to attendees, whether at the SOI Summit or elsewhere?
Yeah, sure, for sure. So really what we saw in 2024 is things kind of hung in, didn't see a whole lot of changes, and the inside business was actually kind of flat. We had just come out of 2 years of, super high inflation, and, unfortunately retailers were having to take price on, food service items especially. And coming into 2024, we knew that was going to be a challenge to kind of, you're trying to cycle the growth of pricing, right? So definitely a difficult task when you can't obviously take price on everything all the time. That's not something that you can do long-term from year to year. So we expected, some soft numbers. The good news is that if you've seen anything from NACS, whether you saw our mid-year update at the NACS show, or maybe went to one of Henry Armour's IULs, We were hoping that the fourth quarter was really going to kind of turn things around, and it did. So October through December of 24 was actually pretty strong, and we were cycling less of those increases from inflation. So good news there for sure. The food service numbers, it looks like the growth as it sits right now is going to be about 5.5%, which isn't what we're used to, of course. But I think that we would probably be pretty happy with that overall, knowing the difficulties that we've had over the past few years. And, supply chain and, pricing in general has been kind of crazy. And the egg thing is going on again now, as a matter of fact. So, so with that being said, I think, NACS's position for sure, it's been a pretty good year for what we had to kind of work through, but it also sets up 2025 to be super good, I hope. One of the other things outside, food service increases on the inside, merchandise also swung up pretty well in the fourth quarter. So good news there too. We were running flat to negative in merchandise sales all year long. So that's bumped up a smidge too. And probably, there's a couple of weird things too, Jeff. Fuel gallons are up over 2% right now, which, again, we've kind of been like, okay, get ready for EVs. And then, gallons bump is, as well as more sites selling fuel. So interesting situation there. But transactions are up on the inside for the first time in a couple of years too. And it swung pretty far into the negative this year, like to the point of over 2% down. So to come back and see, inside transactions being up over a point, super good news for us as well. So, and that's kind of been, other industry experts and, folks like NIQ with the syndicated data, they've been saying that they've been seeing the transactions swing back up too. So it's not just, the SOI sample. I think that there's actually good news there. So, those are the things that we talked about last year, what you needed to watch: grow your transactions, cut your expenses, and do your best to build that inside business. And it seems as if that retailers this year were pretty successful at that. Not a banner year, but a good year overall.
So one quick thing, you had mentioned IULs that Henry Armour, our CEO, and others do. Those are industry update luncheons, and for NACS members, basically what they are is you get a free lunch, and you hear from
Always
the CEO about the industry's numbers and a chance to connect with other people. So I just said a lot of appealing things about that, and they are across the country. So go to convenience.org and click on events and see if there's one in your area.
For sure.
A really good opportunity.
Some of the other leadership too. Jeff Burrell has done one already this year. He's our VP of Retail Engagement. So it really gives another view to the data, of course, number one, but also lets retailers especially interact with the person that's really trying to improve, our offer to them. So, Jeff's a great choice to do that. I know that you've done some as well. So all the Jeffs do it.
Yes, I guess. And so people say there's no such thing as a free lunch anymore. There is a free lunch. But the thing is, that's not even the best part of the day. It's about connecting with people, learning numbers, etc. But that was just a side.
Yes.
What I thought was really interesting is I know everyone does things by a year. But if we were to look at things a little bit differently, it would be, I'm not telling you to, but when we talked about setting up and looking at the 2024 numbers, I think it was either in a podcast or on the stage at the NACS State of the Industry Summit, there was real weakness at the end of 2023 that continued into 2024. Like 5 months, 6 months of just bleh.
Terrible.
So, I don't know if that's a great quote, but here we have.
That was good.
Here we have almost the opposite.
Yes.
The last couple months of 2024 made the year.
Absolutely.
You touched upon a couple things, but what is the difference? Because instead of a year ago looking at, hey, things have been okay, but we think it'll get better. Now we're talking about things are looking pretty good and we're feeling positive.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's cyclical too. When you think about growing anything, if you do really good one year, then obviously it's going to come back and haunt you at some point. So, long-term growth, I think that this industry is probably top notch when it comes to that. And you mentioned, food service over the course of 15 or 20 years is crazy. But for sure, last year at Leadership Forum in Amelia was when it kind of started. We have our research and technology meeting there coinciding with that event. And the retailers were like, my goodness, business is terrible. And this was February of 24, of course. And basically they were like, just tell me everyone's in the same boat. And unfortunately, everyone was in the same boat at that time. But yeah, and you're right. Blah is what it was. And it kind of hung in there for, the first 3 quarters for sure. And I think NACS certainly had their fingers crossed that we were going to have some better news to share. And I think that we do. But you may remember if you went to the summit last year, Varish, our retail financial operational speaker, that was his prescription, knowing that he's actually a medical doctor. His prescription at the end was like, buckle up because it's coming. Business is going to be soft and you need to, circle the wagons, of course, and, cut expenses or, do what you can. And I think that probably most retailers from what I spoke, from what I know, from having those conversations, that's exactly what they did. They just kind of pulled tight and held on. And I think that, obviously, again, I think that it was successful. Certainly not something that, people are going to raise a flag over, but a good solid year. And, if anything, over the course of the time that I've been here, for sure, this industry is resilient. It knows how to make it through the good times as well as the bad times. And I think that we do pretty well with that. And, obviously some single stores, may have kind of lost in the fallout. But the good thing about that is this, industry is still entrepreneurial. You can go open a store tomorrow if you want to bad enough, and you have the capital to do it. So that's one cool thing about this is that, the ebbs and flows are always interesting, but we always seem to kind of rise to the top. And I think that's, a really good thing about the industry. And this is what the summit is about too, like going and learning, what to prepare for, or, being able to go back and think about the things that were said, go back and share them with the folks in your company and be like, hey, you know what? It's not just us. There are people, larger companies, smaller companies, or whatever, that are going through the same issues. So let's, hunker down and make it through this year. And then 2025 hopefully will be much more positive.
So a lot of time, whether I'm talking to the media or others, the lack of a better word, the sexy stuff to talk about is what are the things that saw sales increases. We talked about food service. There's other categories, and of course, be discussions on whether they're up or down. But that's sales is only half of the equation for how do you run a profitable business. The other part is how do you look at expenses? And it doesn't sound as fun. There's some people that are CPAs that love this stuff, that love digging into this.
I do too.
So what are a couple things that you've seen or can kind of tee up that are making a difference in the industry from the expense side, so that revenues and expenses marry up to something that's profitable?
Yeah, for sure. Probably up until 23, coming out of COVID, which I hate to say that, but it's still going to be a landmark in our minds probably forever. But with that being said, the industry was running double-digit growth in operating expenses, and of course, it was everything. It's construction, it's paying folks to come fix things, it's paying people to run your cash register. So we saw all those things really fly through the roof. And this was one of those things that we've been talking about is, hey, you need to get this under control. Card fees, obviously, we're probably not going to leave today without saying card fees at least once. The card fees were flying too. So coming out of 24, what we've seen so far is that growth for operating expenses is down to under 4%. So certainly cut in half over the past, 4 or 5 years. And that's good news for everyone. And just randomly, card fees are flat this year because transactions are flat and fuel prices down. The processors certainly haven't done us any favors. It's just that, it's the nature of the business. So with that being, kind of flat to prior year too, That's a big piece. It's the second largest expense that a convenience retailer pays, after wages and benefits, of course. So all of those things have kind of rolled up into what I believe a lot of it was controlled by the retailers, and some of it just happened to be better. So with that being said, I think that retailers did a good job on that again this year. And really, that's when you talk about benchmarking and you look at these numbers or whatever, the one way that you can immediately impact your profitability as a convenience retailer is to cut expenses. So you can, cut a shift at the store. You can, do some things corporate wide or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you want to use these numbers, expenses are where the rubber meets the road. It can be almost immediate, as a matter of fact, to improve. Now, you can't put yourself in a situation where you have no staff, of course, but at the end of the day, if you're overspending on supplies, you can always stop ordering supplies. So that's one of the good things that I think about this, and what we do in the SOI Summit, is that when people say, wow, my expense growth was 10%, we need to get a handle on this because the industry says that it was just 3.9. So certainly that's something that can always be taken home directly from the summit to say, wow, we have to look at our expense costs.
So we had talked earlier, Varish Goyle with Loop as a medical doctor. Your dog is obviously a CPA because got super energized when you started talking about cost saving. So
that's Desi. We'll make him famous on the NACS podcast.
Okay,
everyone knows Desi.
I don't know if Desi does taxes, but I still haven't submitted mine. So
he'll be more than glad to help you out. He's super good at math.
Good. Bark twice if I get a refund.
Got it.
So. Just finally wrapping up, we've talked a little bit about what the numbers look like. Major shift in the attitude going into the beginning of the year, looking at the numbers.
For sure.
We've talked about the NACS State of the Industry Summit a couple. I may as well just give the official plug. It is the best 2 day. It is the best 2 days to learn about the industry, not just the numbers from the past year, but what the numbers say, and experts in looking at all kinds of different things outside of our industry, financial, customer attitudes, you name it. It's the full package in 48 hours, and also throw in some food safety as an additional bonus in the food safety forum. And there's a lot that you can pick up in Dallas. And if you have an extra little bit of time, it's also a great place to do some site tours and see some really cool stores.
For sure.
One of the more competitive markets in the country. April 8th through 10th, I believe, are the official dates, but the on-stage stuff is 9th and 10th. We'll have new numbers there. There's all kinds of things like regional breakouts, so you'll be able to look at what is your region doing, because we also know not every region is the same. California is much different than New England.
You got that right.
Any place that has a Buc-ee's probably has something a little turbocharged in those numbers. And,
for sure.
And it's also a look at global and what's going across the world. So a lot going on there. We are full-fledged in meeting season at NACS now. So whether it's this event or any other event, we're probably not within a week or two that you don't have another opportunity to go to an event between now and June. So go to convenience.org and click on the events to find more about how to register for the SOI Summit or any others. Okay, final question.
Yes.
That was the plug. Here we are. We're in 2025. Last year, 2024, as I said, my description of 2024 leading in was bleh. What is your description of where we are right now, and make it something more intelligent than what I said with blah?
I certainly, whatever word sounds professional that's hopeful, I think would be probably the way to go. Certainly there's things that we have as an industry that are exciting. Watching the food business grow, certainly. And I think that, the opportunity for everyone, both smaller operators and the larger folks, are abound. So it's all about getting more folks in your store, boost them as inside transactions, and that's where it all comes from. So certainly opportunity is knocking, and I'm excited to be able to present that attitude when we come to Dallas in April.
Chris, thank you again for joining us.
Sure thing.
Always interested. And I think hopeful is a great word, because
Yes.
last year I don't think we were using that word hopeful and looking at the numbers.
Hopeful was not used very frequently.
It
That's
was
for sure.
more, there were grimaces
Yes.
if you even use the word hopeful. So this is true hopeful.
Yes, for
And
sure.
look forward to hearing the final numbers in April at the NACS SOI Summit. Find Chris. You'll see Chris's work throughout the year, well beyond the summit. So again, thanks for joining us, Chris.
Yep, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.